going to run through how I reduce my lining pattern pieces when the lining piece is exactly the same size as the exterior piece. So some pattern designers will give you a separate lining piece, so it's already been reduced, but some pattern designers will give you the lining piece that is exactly the same size and just advise you to increase your seam allowances. So that does work, but I just find personally that reducing the pattern piece in size and then keeping my seam allowances the same size as I sew around just seem to give a better finish. The inside of the lining just seems to sit better inside of the bag. So this is how I do it. So this is how it tends to work better with patterns that are, you know, like with a boxed finish. You can do it with bags that have gussets, but it's a much more difficult process to explain, and I'll maybe try doing that another video further down the line explaining that. But this is how I do it with this type of pattern. So I'm also going to explain as well how I reduce the pattern piece for stabilizer and fleece as well. So I have 3 pattern pieces, all exactly the same size, and this is just a pattern piece that I have put together basically just for a pouch. It's probably about a pencil case size, I would say. And basically what I've done is 11 inches by 6 inches. I've taken it in by 3/4 of an inch at the top and taken the sides in so that it's slightly on an angle, because that's the look that I like. And then I've boxed the corners by 1 1/4 inches, and then I've replicated that pattern piece 3 times. So I have 3 pattern pieces exactly the same. So one pattern piece is going to be left exactly as is, and I've written on it cut 2 exterior pieces and 2 interfacing pieces, and I've written on that it's going to be a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then that pattern piece is put to one side and left as is. And then this pattern piece is going to be for my lining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark at the bottom 1/4 of an inch. It would help if I'd put my pen, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then I'm going to mark along, all the way along the bottom here, a 1/4 of an inch. And then I don't want to reduce this top seam. This top seam wants to stay the same because it doesn't want to be reduced. It's the bulk of the lining piece that wants to be reduced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my ruler with this edge here. Zoom in a tiny little bit for you. And then line it up with that mark that I've just made there, and make a line. And then I'm going to do exactly the same on this side here. And then I'm going to go round this box corner by 1/4 of an inch. And I'm not taking anything off this top seam, I'm only taking it off the bottom. I'm just going to line this one up slightly better because I haven't done a very good job. So I've left this top seam the same, sorry, and then reduced it down to the bottom at 1/4 on both sides, taken 1/4 off the bottom and 1/4 off this box seam. And then what I'm going to do, when I can find scissors that aren't fabric scissors, which I can't seem to see at the moment, I have them, is I'm then just going to remove those lines that I've created, and then the seam allowance is still going to be 3/8 of an inch. So this is now my lining piece for my exterior. So this still lines up exactly the same at the top, but is smaller around the inside. So I'll just write on that it's my lining piece, and I want to cut 2 of my lining fabric and 2 for the interfacing, and that is those 2 complete. Just come back out again. And then if I'm going to be using a stabiliser or probably fusible fleece with this pattern, what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to cut out a pattern piece that is not within the seam allowances of this piece. So what sometimes people will do is they'll reduce, so my seam allowance will be 3/8 of an inch. They will reduce the pattern piece all the way around by 3/8 of an inch. Now what I like to do is I like to reduce it slightly more, so by another 1/8 of an inch. So that would make it 1/2 an inch. And the reason that I like to do that is that it just gives it that little bit more, so that when that fabric is turned, the fusible fleece, or if you're using Decaville or anything like that, it's not sitting right on that stitch line. You sometimes find that you'll get creases or waving if that Decaville or that fusible fleece is sitting right on that stitch line. And I just find that 1/8 of an inch just gives it that little bit more leeway in that turn against the seam. So for our fusible fleece piece, or if you were using Decaville, so any sort of stabiliser, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reducing this pattern piece by 1/2 an inch, because our seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch, and we're going to be doing that all the way around. So you want it out of the top seam, you want it out of the bottom seam, and you want it out of the boxed edge and the boxed corner seams as well. So you would just do that all the way around. And then you'll literally cut along those lines and that would be your fusible fleece, or like I say, stabiliser pattern piece, which would be 1/2 inch smaller than your exterior pieces. When you come to fuse your fusible fleece onto the exterior pieces, it's quite good practice to mark your seam allowances on your exterior piece. You can use a heat erasable pen or chalk, so that you can line this fusible fleece piece up so that you know that you've got it positioned exactly right. So what I would tend to do is, if I'm using a pattern that's printed, obviously I've just sort of marked this pattern up today for the purposes of demonstrating this, but if you're using a pattern piece that doesn't have a separate lining piece, and the lining piece is the same, what I would do is I would print out a second copy of that pattern piece and then create my lining piece exactly the same way that I've done it here. If then you're wanting to create a third piece for fusible fleece or stabiliser, for argument's sake, if the pattern doesn't actually call for it but it's something that you want to add, then I would print out a third copy and reduce the pattern piece by the seam allowance plus 1/8 of an inch. So that is how I adjust my pattern pieces for the lining and fusible fleece and stabiliser. So I hope that's been helpful. Any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.